So the S21 Ultra is easily my favorite Samsung smartphone since the Note 7. But it's interesting because there's no groundbreaking new features, no new form factor or anything, just an almost perfectly improved slab of metal, silicon, and glass. This is totally the S20 Ultra with just about all the right improvements. So remember those autofocus issues? Non-existent. Remember 120 Hz and only 1080p? Out the window. Remember the disappointing camera performance? Well, it's all gone. All of it. So clearly Samsung had their ear to the pavement and put all those R&D dollars to good use in some of the most crucial areas. But of course, even when priced at $11.99, no phone is ever perfect, and so we'll definitely be getting into some of the shortcomings and make sure you guys get the full picture. What's going on, folks? Welcome to today's Tech with Landon, where I bring you guys a brand new perspective on your favorite pieces of tech, and today let's jump into the Galaxy S21 Ultra. So here's the deal. The S21 Ultra gives us an all-new camera module design, which is a part of what Samsung is calling a contour cut body design. And aside from the new look, you'll notice it's actually composed of metal as opposed to the typical glass build we've been accustomed to for years. And it's definitely a vibe. It gives you the impression that the camera module and the frame are made from the same piece of metal, similar to how the iPhone 12 Pro Max's rear glass, including the camera module, is indeed milled from a single piece of glass. But I love it. It certainly demands attention for all the right reasons, especially with the 4 camera sensors sitting there, each of which I'll get into in a minute. But man, it is totally the little things like the beveled edge around each sensor that I think adds to the premium persona, if you will. Now, achieving this contour cut design meant that Samsung had to flatten the display, which ultimately gives us a little bit more to hold on to. So the frame of the S21 Ultra is almost twice as thick as the frame of the S20 Ultra and Note 20 Ultra. And I gotta say, Samsung is an absolute beast at finding that ideal balance of rear glass curvature and frame surface area to make sure you have a confident grip each and every time you pick up your phone. And there's no exception here. Even with the thicker frame, the S21 Ultra feels even more secure without a case. It's not the completely flat sides you get on, say, iPhone 12 Pro Max that can feel a little bit sharp after a while, but they do provide that same sense of security you get from a device with flat sides. So again, the thicker sides meant that Samsung had to flatten the display, and I think they managed to improve even from what I consider to be the best display design from a practicality standpoint on the S20 Ultra. The bezels are even smaller this time, and it seems like in order to maximize usability, especially with the new S Pen support, the bezel is basically the only thing on the curved portion of the display. And one thing I think tends to be underappreciated is the balance of a device. So from the looks of it, you'd probably think the S21 Ultra is a little bit top heavy given the size of the camera module in the top corner. But it's actually near perfectly balanced, which in the long run takes away from the fatigue you'd likely get from holding an unbalanced device as long as we hold our phones every day. And I feel like I totally wouldn't have known that it was heavier than the Note 20 Ultra if I didn't look it up. So definitely some great weight distribution. But I think another underappreciated aspect of Samsung's design in recent years has been the curvature of the rear panel. I think it's definitely the most ideal design since it actually conforms to the shape of your hand. And then that combined with the new matte finish and the phantom silver color, oof. Very reminiscent of past colors like Prism White and Aura Glow. But I think Samsung's objective was to simplify and streamline the design, and they did a fantastic job. I think it turned out to be a perfect balance of display curvature and usability, resulting in a unique design with a familiar yet improved display form factor. Definitely let me know your thoughts on the design by dropping a comment down below the subscribe button. And speaking of displays, Samsung always seems to find a way to one-up themselves just when it looks like there's nowhere else for them to go. So we've got a 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED Infinity O display, so still rocking the hole punch camera on the front, but they managed to improve on the S20 Ultra and Note 20 Ultra's displays. First off, by enabling 120 Hz refresh rate at maximum display resolution of 1440p, and this new display is capable of adjusting that refresh rate down to 10 Hz to reserve some battery as needed. And they've also upped the maximum display brightness to 1500 nits, the brightest from any smartphone yet. And it doesn't even stop there. The display also features a 3,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio a 50% improvement over the S20 Ultra. And lastly, it's the first of its kind in terms of power efficiency. All this contributes towards a display that's extremely colorful and color accurate, and it's really bright and vibrant, all while still being super smooth yet power efficient. And Samsung has begun slowly but surely dialing back the curvature of the display, as the resounding feedback from the community is, yeah, it looks good, but it's not very practical. So this is definitely the flattest iteration of the curve that we've seen, and to me, it's the best because it reduces the amount of glare on the curved edge, and it makes it just a little bit easier to access the edge panels, which is where I keep my app folders and my important contacts. It just makes for better viewing across the board. Okay, now similar to the S20 Ultra, the cameras are intended to be a main selling point of the S21 series, specifically of the S21 Ultra. And I think we were all quite a bit disappointed by the performance of the S20 Ultra's cameras last year. The autofocus was bad, the dynamic range was bad, and there was a big difference in performance between using all 108 megapixels and using the pixel bend 12 megapixel shots. So Samsung had every reason to go all out, and once again, it seems like they've made all the right improvements. So if you didn't already know, we get 4 total cameras on the rear. A 12 megapixel ultra wide, now with dual pixel autofocus, a 108 megapixel wide angle camera with phase detection, autofocus, and optical image stabilization. And then here's where Samsung switches things up. We get 2 10 megapixel optical telephoto cameras at 3x and 10x zoom, now featuring the much better dual pixel autofocus while retaining optical image stabilization. Then instead of the old time of flight sensor, we get the same laser autofocus unit we saw in the Note 20 Ultra, and of course, the flash that I think is safe to argue almost no one uses. But I gotta say, I am very impressed. First of all, the reason the hype behind the cameras isn't just cap is because Samsung actually addressed the exact issues that plagued the S20 Ultra's camera system. So to address autofocus, Samsung added a feature called Focus Enhancer that turns on whenever you get too close for the main camera to focus. And what's happening is the phone is actually switching to the ultra wide camera with dual pixel autofocus, which is much better suited for close-ups or macro shots. So you can get pretty close to your subject and get a perspective that you never could on a Samsung device. So dynamic range is inherently better due to the improved performance of the Snapdragon 888, which now has 3 image signal processors, plus some of the improvements that Samsung made to the sensor itself. So I feel like the dynamic range is on point the majority of the time, and it's able to control the highlights and the shadows a bit better than the S20 Ultra could. And this carries right over to shooting in 108 megapixel mode. The dynamic range seems to be the exact same across both modes, so very glad to see those improvements. But generally, you still get photos that have punchy and vibrant colors with a lot of detail and natural bokeh. And when you're switching between the cameras, the image quality stays the same, as do the colors, kind of giving the vibe that it's one camera with infinite focal length. Both the 3x and 10x zoom cameras come in handy and do not disappoint, 0 complaints there. And even moving to 30x zoom, you still retain a lot of detail and preserve those vibrant colors. Now, a lot of people might be saying that the 100x zoom shots are useless, and that's not exactly true. You see, it actually depends on how far away you are from your subject. Case in point, in this photo, the truck was a good distance from where I was sitting, but not too far, so this 100x shot is totally usable. But if you look here, when you're shooting something that's actually really far away, that's when you see the quality decrease. So the further the subject, the lesser the quality of the photo. And if you've ever tried to take a shot at 30x or 100x zoom, then you know exactly how hard it is to keep it stable. So there's a new focus lock feature that keeps the viewfinder steady when you're zoomed in 30 to 100 times. So you can see that Samsung is placing a greater focus on zoom capabilities. No pun intended. So the idea is from 1x to 10x, you can get some really high quality optical and hybrid zoom photos. And then from 10x to 100x, you can get some pretty high quality super resolution zoom photos. It's literally like having a camera bag full of lenses in a smartphone. It's crazy. And last but not least, we get a lot of the usual camera modes with improvements, and we get some new modes altogether. I think one of the most significant enhancements is the ability to take night portraits with the front or rear cameras, adding some nice versatility to night shots. And if you're into vlogging, there's a director's view mode that provides a view of all 4 cameras at once, allowing you to record from the front camera and a rear camera of your choosing simultaneously. And if you already have an S21 Ultra, then drop a comment about your camera experience so far down below the subscribe button. All right, now moving on to performance, I think there's a few key areas where the improvement is clearly evident. For starters, we get an upgraded ultrasonic fingerprint sensor from Qualcomm that's actually 77% larger than the first generation. And I don't see a huge speed increase with the sensor, but I am noticing a pretty big accuracy improvement. I think Samsung's decision to roll with fingerprint biometrics as opposed to facial or iris recognition has definitely paid off, given the much more appealing notchless designs they've been able to rock with, but also, of course, COVID. But when it comes to day-to-day use, I think the raw processing power of the Snapdragon 888 shines through, and it's really taken the software experience and capabilities to the next level. It's powering the heavy features like night mode portraits or 8K video recording and gaming. And then when you combine that with 12 gigs of RAM, it becomes nearly impossible to slow down the S21 Ultra. The base model comes with 128 gigs of storage, which is enough for me because I use cloud storage, but I know for a lot of people, that's not enough. It's not gonna cut it, and they finally got rid of the SD card slot, so no more expandable storage. I feel like they totally should have gone with 256 gigs like we saw on the Note 10 Plus, but it is what it is. You can upgrade to 256 or 512 gigs if you really need it. And this guy's powered by a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, the same size as last year, and honestly similar performance as last year. With the power efficiency enhancements from the new display and from software optimization, I'm averaging about 5 to 8 hours of screen on time, which is great. And then when I do need a charge, I'm at 100% in less than an hour. So definitely a power user's device. It's engineered to handle some pretty intensive tasks and stay alive or recharge quickly while doing it, even if it is with just a 25-watt charger. But I still wouldn't recommend getting an S21 simply for 5G. Unfortunately, the kind of 5G we think of with 1,000 megs up and 1,000 megs down, known as millimeter wave, is really few and far between, and it's concentrated in the more densely populated cities. So the more regular, widespread, low to mid-band 5G only provides marginal improvements over 4G LTE, if any. Okay, now let's talk about OneUI 3.1 features, starting with Dolby Atmos. So Samsung flagships have had Dolby Atmos baked in since before OneUI even existed with the Galaxy S9, but it's largely stayed the same. It's a feature that I've always had enabled, and I've just kind of gotten used to it, but with the S21 Ultra, we get 360-degree spatial audio through Dolby head tracking. So basically, as you turn your head from left to right, you pick up more sound in each ear coming from the direction of the display. It actually sounds really good, and it puts the icing on a cake when it's time for some media consumption with the Buds Pro on the go. Oh, and the head tracking only works in video streaming apps, not any music apps. But one of the best new features of OneUI 3.1 is auto switching. So with the Buds Pro or Buds Live, if, for example, you have the S21 Ultra in addition to the Tab S7 Plus, your buds will automatically switch back and forth based on which device is playing audio. So if you're using your buds to listen to content on your tablet and your phone starts ringing, the buds will automatically pause what you're watching, switch to your phone, and then when you hang up the call, they automatically switch back to your tablet and resume playback. I think this is such a great feature for maximizing productivity and convenience, especially if you happen to own a Samsung tablet. I've only used it a handful of times, but it certainly works as intended. And this is the work of the new ultra wideband technology we've seen gaining some popularity among the Apples and Samsungs of the world to make for faster and more seamless connectivity and data transfer. I'm actually really excited to see what enhancements Samsung and others will be able to create using ultra wideband. And let's talk about the new S Pen support. So for the first time, Samsung added S Pen support to the S series, but different from what we're used to in a couple of ways. First of all, it's not housed inside of the device like we see on the Note series. You actually have to buy a separate case that houses the S Pen. And second of all, it lacks all of the Bluetooth features that we've gotten accustomed to. They saved all of those for the new yet to be released S Pen Pro. But I think this is the beginning of the end for the Note series to be replaced by foldables. Let me know what you guys think about the new S Pen support and what you think this means for the Note series with a comment down below the subscribe button. Now, these next few features are evidence of the growth of Samsung's direct relationship with Google. Since pretty much time immemorial, Samsung has been building out their own ecosystem by creating their own versions of pretty much every Google app, which turned out to be a good idea given what Huawei is currently going through. But now Samsung and Google seem to have realized the potential of a strong partnership. So for one, we get Google Home device control right from the quick panel, which is extremely convenient given that way more products support Google than Samsung SmartThings. And second, we get Google Discover right from the home screen, something most Android devices have always had, but Samsung always seemed kind of hell-bent on providing an offering that was quite honestly pretty useless. Like the one feature I'm turning off right away as soon as the new phone comes in. In any case, your Google feed is now only a swipe away, right where it belongs. And then third, we get background effects in Google Duo. And if you notice, there's a new icon as soon as you open up the app, and you can add a blur, a color, or a picture to the background. I know my video calls are up like 400% from before the pandemic, so definitely a nice feature to spruce things up a bit. In general though, there's just a lot of subtle yet great new features that help complete the overarching theme of premium convenience. Seems like after all the years of scrutiny early on, we've seen like a complete 180 from Samsung in terms of their software offering. Features like creating a widget from tapping and holding an icon on the home screen, or the new settings suggestion hashtags that help you find what you need, or even the increased dynamic lock screen categories. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Now, as great as the S21 Ultra is, there are three key takeaways that do reduce its value just a bit, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. So, number one, first things first, this is the first Samsung flagship to remove the charger from the box. Now, I personally have a ton of chargers that I've accumulated over the years, but I know that's not everybody, so I can definitely see the downside to removing it. Now, number two, Samsung Pay has actually lost its best feature. So the one thing that put Samsung Pay above every other mobile payment service was MST, Magnetic Secure Transmission, which basically allowed Samsung Pay to mimic an actual card swipe, making it accepted virtually everywhere you could swipe a card. Samsung even acquired Loop Pay to get their hands on this tech, but I bet the reason they got rid of it was because of the success rate. So oftentimes the payment would take several attempts to go through, thus decreasing the quality of your experience using Samsung Pay. NFC, on the other hand, goes through instantly when you put your phone just the slightest bit near the terminal. But even though it's a better experience, it's now decreased our number of opportunities to use the service to the same as every other mobile payment service. And then last but not least, Samsung finally got rid of SD card support. Let's take a moment of silence, please. Just a few moments. But no, all jokes aside, the only way to get more storage now is to pay for a higher storage variant. So the base model is at 128 gigs, and then you can upgrade to 256 or 512. Now, I do think it's been a long time coming, but that doesn't make it sting any less for those who are really taking advantage of it. Let me know with a comment down below the subscribe button if any of these takeaways have directly affected you in your experience. But all in all, there's no way in heck that those three takeaways overshadow all the right improvements that Samsung did make. There's a number of improvements to the display, giving it more brightness, contrast, smoothness, durability, and practicality. There's a number of improvements to the camera system, making shots more detailed and in focus, while also improving the 108 megapixel lens, improving and adding a second zoom lens, making macro shots and night portraits possible, and adding new modes altogether. So I'm sure you can see why this is my favorite Samsung device since 2017. I mean, the sheer number of direct improvements over its predecessor far outweighed the drawbacks, and I think Samsung is headed in the right direction. I don't think we're too far off from seeing Samsung ditch the Note series in lieu of foldable, so I think we can expect to see the S series take a more front and center focus as Samsung's soon-to-be sole candy bar style flagship smartphone. And so, given the major improvements, I think that one could argue that it is totally worth an upgrade from the somewhat disappointing S20 Ultra. But if you can hang tight for one more year, I think the improvements will be even more drastic. So, conclusion, S21 Ultra, highly recommended. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for supporting the channel by sticking around until the end. I really do appreciate it. If you found the video helpful or informative, then you gotta go smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, turn on notifications so you can be the first to know when I'm bringing a brand new perspective to your favorite pieces of tech. Alrighty guys, be safe out there. Peace and love.